Hi, everyone. Welcome to Creative Thrive. Our guest today is a testament to the transformative power of creativity and food, not just as sustenance, but as a medium for sharing stories, fostering connections, and bridging worlds. With a loyal following of over 5 million people across her platforms, she has captivated audiences far and wide through her innovative recipes and stories that weave her rich heritage with universal themes of identity, empowerment, and resilience. Her appearances on national television, from the Food Network to CBS Saturday Morning and The Today Show, and her features in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and numerous other publications have solidified her culinary and storytelling icon. Yes, I said icon status. Hailing from Chicago with roots tracing back to what is now known as North Korea, our guest embarked on a transformative journey. What began in the legal world eventually found its calling in vegan cuisine, launching a blog that quickly became a beacon of inspiration. Her pivot to sharing 60-second recipe videos paired with rich family stories during the isolation of a global pandemic went viral. It opened hearts and kitchens to the power of food as a medium for connection, compassion, and understanding. Her debut cookbook, launched as one of the best of 2021 by the New York Times and the New Yorker, is a testament again to her skill, creativity, and her work's profound impact on so many people. But her recent James Beard Award truly underscored her remarkable contribution to food and culture, which has bridged gaps and brought us together, one meal and one story at a time. Please join me in welcoming an extraordinary voice in the world of food and storytelling, the James Beard Award-winning author and the Korean vegan herself, Joanne Molinaro.
Wow, thank you so much, Tabitha. That was like the nicest introduction I've ever heard of me.
Really? I love that.
It's beautiful.
I mean, we talked before you came on. I'm such a fan.
Oh, well, it's mutual. And I was a fan of you long before you knew who I was. So that's really exciting.
Well, I've known who you were before a lot of other people knew who you
very
were.
true. That's very true. You're like an OG Korean vegan fan.
I really am. I was attracted to the food, obviously, which is, I love food. Well, I love hate. I have a love-hate relationship with food as well. But
I feel you.
it was your storytelling that was so profound and at times so vulnerable and so honest.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think maybe that's something we have in common. Different kind of vulnerability, maybe, but you've always been very truthful and honest as well in how you appear in all of the various spaces that I got to watch you in. It's a different kind of storytelling, but it's the same sort of nakedness in some ways, which is really an olive branch, right? Like, hey, I'm going to be real with you, so maybe you could be real with me too.
Yeah, I love the combination though, because food is so incredibly powerful.
Yes.
For so many different reasons. And it is that coming together and that olive branch of even listening to some of the things you talk about, which are a little polarizing sometimes and a little uncomfortable sometimes, and sharing those stories. I can feel them and I know they resonate with so many people, and the more that happens and the more we can open ourselves, the more compassion we have and the more creativity I believe that we can foster in each other as well.
Well, I think that oftentimes the things we don't talk about are the things that we feel the most, right? Like those are the things that cause us the most pain, or those are the things that cause us even the most joy sometimes. And so putting words to things that are so powerful but remain hidden is a way of, like you said at the very beginning, bridging the gap. Um, because people are very polarized right now. That's one of the
Mhm.
effects of social media is rampant polarization, and it's challenging sometimes to not just build that bridge but to have the courage to walk across it.
Yeah, and you do it so beautifully. What was it about the fusion of food and storytelling that struck a chord for you?
Well, I think it was like you said, food is very powerful because it's one of the few things that we all as human beings and sentient beings we have in common. These days, when all we ever really hear about on the internet and everywhere else is everything that divides us, everything we don't have in common, everything we feel differently about, whether it's a physical attribute or even an opinion, I wanted to go back to, well, what are some things that we have in common that like nobody can deny? And one of them is food. Everybody needs to eat. So I thought, okay, let's start at the very beginning, something super fundamental and easy. That brings everybody together already. And
Hmm.
then we begin the work, which is okay, well, now that you're at my dining table and we're sitting around and we're eating together, which is a very a vulnerable place already,
Hmm.
maybe we can talk about some things that's memorable, something that's funny, something that's moving, something that's hard or taboo. All of the stories that you walk out of a dinner party with that you remember 5 years later. I remember this dinner party I went to and I had this fantastic conversation. That's really what I was trying to do with these stories.
I find it so fascinating. And I also wonder, you are a lawyer or were a lawyer, but you're a lawyer. That's something that it doesn't disappear even if you don't
Right.
practice anymore. So you are a lawyer. Often lawyers can be really great storytellers. I believe that some of the best lawyers are good storytellers, whether you like their story or not.
That's exactly right. And I was a trial lawyer, so it was my professional job to tell stories. Not always the most exciting stories, like stories about washing machines and cardboard boxes, but stories nonetheless to audiences that needed to understand who are the main characters in this story? What is the conflict in this story? Who's
Hmm.
the bad guy? Who's the good guy? And empowering my audience to come up with the right ending. That's always sort of the gig of a trial lawyer, right? Whether the audience is a jury or a judge. And so when you listen to a lot of my stories, yes, there's a punchline, but I'm often trying to make the person listening like not be convinced by the punchline, but ask them to look into themselves. Like what is the lesson for you in this story? How can you relate to this story? Is there some takeaway for you in this story? Because I think the most powerful lessons that we learn are the ones that we co-teach.
Hmm.
We teach ourselves, but we're also listening to a teacher. And that's really what I wanted to do with a lot of these messages.
And that's why I brought up my curiosity and made the parallel between being a lawyer and the storyteller that you are now. Because from following you, as I have for such a long time, and your stories were always captivating, and I could feel what you shared as a part of me.
Mhm.
If you were talking about your father, right, and your culture, no, I don't share your culture. I don't have that imprint in me, but I know what that father daughter dynamic is like. I know what that feeling is like. I know what that pain can be like or that vulnerability can be like. And that is where you bridge these amazing gaps and open windows for us of possibility and potential.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a great description. The windows of possibility and potential. And that's really what this is all about. I often feel like when I'm writing a voiceover for one of my videos, or I'm putting together a story, or even when I'm doing like something longer, right? Whether it's, chapter for the book or for the podcast or something like that, I think of myself kind of like knocking on someone's door, right? And they're suspicious of me because they don't know me, and they're like, "What are you selling? Are you a snake oil person or whatever?" Right? And they open the door just a crack, and I get that one chance to convince them to let
Oof.
my foot through that wedge and keep it open just a little bit longer until finally they swing that door open and they let me in and they invite me for coffee or cookies or whatever it is, right? And so, what am I going to do to get them to open the door, answer the knocking door? How can I keep that wedge just open long enough until they feel comfortable to invite me in? And so, if you think about it, that knock on the door is the enticing food. Oh, I see some of this looks good, right? And then they hear the story, and it's like, okay, well, you're right. I'm not Korean. My parents are not from North Korea. I don't know what it's like to grow up as this woman, but I do know what it's like to have a sort of tense relationship with my father. Or
Mhm.
I do know what it's like to look in the mirror and hate what I see, or I know what it's like to fight with food, even though I love it. So these are very universal stories of pain or struggle or hardship. And that's what keeps that door open long enough for me to then get my foot through that wedge and say, hey, I think I deserve a seat on your couch.
Yeah. And that it's such a beautifully creative thing to do, though. And I think if we look at especially your description of what you've just given us, we can all do that. We can do that in our personal lives. We don't need to have a cook. We don't need to put it online. We can do it in our day-to-day interactions in so many ways. And I think if we could do that and open up that door of possibility and communication with each other and a little bit more understanding, how much better the world would be and how much more
Certainly,
tolerant we would be.
yes. And I think that's really the thing. And I mean, I think one of the reasons that I always really liked the way that you showed up was that you obviously had no patience for BS or fools, but there was this very available line of empathy and compassion that was so clear. And I love that about people. It's like when there's that dichotomy of like, no, I do not have patience for fools, but I have compassion for everyone. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's very consistent with my personality as well. And one of the reasons I started sharing these stories, I started this back in 2017, was in part to educate me. Like, I was like, well, I'm part of this equation. If there is a divide in my country, if there's polarization happening where I live and where, what I watch and all of these things, and that's distressing to me, then it's my responsibility to figure out, what did I do to contribute to that? Where can I be better? What blind spots do I have that need to be filled in? And so again, it really was that olive branch of, okay, I'm gonna be real. I'm gonna show you what's going on in my life and my heart. And then maybe I'll learn from all of you what's going on out there, and why what I see right now may not be 100% of what is available to see.
When you first started and you were practicing, and I want everyone to realize that even though even in my opening I talked about in 2020 you started to change your form, and like the rest of us, you had more time at home. So you weren't going to the day job, right? And you had more time at home that you could devote to Korean vegan. But when you first started, you were practicing law. And I don't like the term side hustle for me. It feels diminishing, but whatever you choose to call it, we'll go with. But you were doing it on the side to your day job. And it felt for me like an exploration of you and a documentation of you in a way, because it doesn't have the same feel it does now because you've grown, but it really felt like you were sharing parts of you with all of us. But in that, you were learning about yourself, not just your food and the recipes that you were creating and curating, but about Joanne as well.
Yes, I definitely agree with that. And I'm going to apologize in advance for the barky dog in the background. I apologize for that. Um, but I think that there were a couple of things. Number one, what you mentioned about the side hustle. To me, hustle always, I think, requires money, like a
Yeah,
commercial aspect to it.
agreed.
And of course, I was not making any money. So I never viewed it as a side hustle. And maybe that's in part because I think of it in the same way that you do, which is, uh, it was like you said, like an exploration of me and hobby at best, I would say. And then also, like, I think, for you, I feel like you're artist. Like you're an artist, and that was always so clearly part of your identity. Obviously you're an incredibly successful business person, entrepreneur, and all of those things. But to me, I mean, just watching your creations, I'm like, she's so artistic and very creative. I never viewed myself as that. I was a lawyer. I was like, I'm really good with spreadsheets. I'm very good with the calculator. Give me emotion, I'll draft it. So like I never viewed myself as a creative whatsoever. And I only started the Korean vegan because somebody encouraged me to adopt a hobby outside of the law, because they could see that the law was, sucking me dry, if you will. And so it was really a way for me to be like, well, how creative can I be? What does that even look like? What is art? Like all of these highfalutin philosophical creative questions. And you're right, the pandemic, gave me an interesting opportunity to explore that in this new format on a new platform with a new audience. And it was extremely fun. So when you first said, you were practicing, I was like, does she mean the law or does she mean practicing? Like I was literally practicing to be, a creative person.
Do you think you're creative now? Because I view you, thank you for saying you think I'm creative. I view you as a creative.
It's funny. My husband, he's a concert pianist, and so he's like an artist. Like in my
Mhm.
view, like he's been artistic since he was 3 years old. That's all he's ever wanted to be, and he's very successful. Is ridiculously talented, and he's always like, Joanne, you're an artist. Like get it through your head, you're an artist. And if I disagree with certain people about things, he's like, well, that's because you're an artist, and artists have a very particular way of viewing the world, And I'm like, okay. So I think I think today I would say that I view myself as a person who's creative in a specific way. I think that's like the most I can attribute to. I'm still very hardwired to be analytical, project oriented, and I love my spreadsheets and all of those things. But I've now realized, well, you can also love spreadsheets and love coming up with crazy, recipes in your
And
kitchen.
also, and
Exactly.
also, right? But I love talking about this because I think creativity, when you talk about creativity, it does a couple of things. The first reaction that you had that feels that very visceral reaction of I'm not creative, right? Of people go, well, I'm not creative, I'm an accountant, or I'm not this, I do that. That's not creative. I don't agree with that because I think you can be creative with a spreadsheet. You can be
Hmm.
creative with how you move your finances around, right? There's creativity in many different things. And then there are some people that also close down with creativity because perhaps they were taught at a young age that what they were creating was crap, right? As little
Yes.
kids, don't doodle that, you're making a mess. What, that doesn't look like a tiger, that looks like a box, right? Whatever we were told as children. And that just starts to close down that creative being in us
I
as well.
I could not agree more. And I'm so glad you raised that, because even as you were describing that, I was like, well, my parents never said anything I was doing was bad, or, took a drawing and was like, this is hideous, or anything like that. But they made it so clear throughout my whole life that, well, this is nice for you as a fun little thing, but it will never be your full-time
Yeah.
job. And they so overtly discouraged any real pursuit of creativity that I quickly succumbed to that. I was like, well, I guess they're right. Maybe I'm just not worthwhile as a creative person. And it's fun for me, but ultimately it cannot be my life's pursuit or anything really productive. And I think that absolutely informed my view of myself. And it's something that I continue to struggle with, I think. But it's a good struggle, Tabitha. It's a fun struggle because I feel like I'm constantly peeling back a layer of me and saying, oh, well, this is interesting, or I never knew this about myself. And it's fun and empowering to know that, okay, well, I do have this analytical side to me. I'm very goal oriented. I'm into numbers and all of that stuff. But wow, there's this other side to me that coexists. And isn't that sort of lovely?
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think that's part of being a creative. It isn't an end result.
Yeah.
Creativity isn't an end result. It's a journey. It is all the steps and the process that goes into it. The end result is just sometimes, I believe, anticlimactic when you get to the end, right? The end result is like, wah, wah. But the steps that you get there and the preparation and the feeling and the playing and the trying is all part of that beautiful creative process.
I think that is really profoundly important. And I think that that is what makes you a real artist. Because I feel like I do not have that appreciation because I am so goal oriented. Like, I'm like, process, 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 process. Okay, now what does this video actually look like? So like to me, I'm so focused on that end result. But I love what you said because I think some of the greatest thinkers, not just artists, but some of the greatest thinkers are constantly encouraging people to not focus so hard on the finish line, on that end result, but also appreciate that journey, the growth that happens, the lessons that we learn from it, because obviously it's all of those little incremental gains along the way that don't just inform that end result, but also the end results of so many other future artistic endeavors, right? And
Yeah,
and makes it
100%.
sustainable, right? In a
Yeah.
way that doesn't mean, okay, well, this is my one masterpiece and you'll never hear from me again.
Yeah, 100%. But I'm also going to call BS on you because I am imagining, I don't know, in my imagination, when you're in the kitchen and you're like honing a recipe or you're coming up with something new or you're dissecting and doing it your way of something that you're going to present to all of us, you're in your creative flow journey.
I love
And I'm
that.
sure you're much less like analytical when you're in that.
It's
That
an
would be my guess.
it's an interesting, yeah, it's probably an interesting bird's eye view. I do have lots of spreadsheets out, even when I'm developing a recipe, and a lot of it is research based, but you're right. It's like some of it is just inexplicable. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, I don't know why I thought of this or why I decided to do that. And but I'm going to go with it. I, sort of have developed an instinct for things, whether it's in writing, photography, videography, recipe development, storytelling, all of it. But as I'm sure you have experienced in your own journey, a lot of it is also just like kind of keeping your ear open, your eyes open, like what's out there? What is the universe trying to tell me?
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. I also think trusting yourself.
Mm.
It's listening to intuition, you can call it that, and also seeing what is happening and what is coming to you and being presented. But there's also that point of trust when you have to surrender. You have to jump and you just have to trust.
Yeah, but see that I would be interested. Maybe like one day I get to hear your story, but I would be interested in you because you always seem so confident in your choices. Like, I know this is right. And I don't know if that's just born out of, well, I've been doing this for decades and I know what's right, so just trust me, or if it's more just like an innate sort of like, I know my voice, I trust my voice, I trust my vision. If it's some combination, or if it's like, no, I'm not confident, I'm just pretending that I am until I get there.
We can call it all of the above depending on the period of life. I think when it was younger, it was pretending I was confident to just be able to move through, right? And to be able to get through and overcome the vulnerability. And I think many of us, especially when we're young, we do that. Then periods of it just is. It's an isness. I just am who I am, and this is who I am, and I'm making no apologies for any of it. I don't really care what any of you think. And that's right.
And it works.
That served me. That worked. And I think, this part and why we're having this conversation is a new iteration of that creativity and having life be life and experiencing many challenges in life and moving through grief and aging and disruption and all of the things. And it makes me no different from anyone else because we've all gone through them in our own way, and sitting back and going, that journey was fun. Those 50 years were a good time, but WTF, what's next? Right. And that exploration.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you do so beautifully, though, with your honesty and your storytelling, is because we can glimpse into what you're sharing. And when we can glimpse into someone else's story, then we can reflect it back onto ourselves, and we can ask ourselves some questions that perhaps we didn't want to ask at one point.
Exactly. Those hard questions are often the things that catapult us into growth.
Yeah. And again, as you've said, wrapping it into food, albeit vegan food, because that is polarizing within itself. And you tell people that you're a vegan, that's like a whole thing right there. Says with experience, because I am as well.
I know.
So that's the whole thing. It is just such a fascinating and again, creative way of going into it. What is I'm going to make you squirm, but that's okay. What is your creative process look like from, say, conceptualizing a new recipe or something that you would like to deconstruct and then reconstruct in your own way to when we get to see it? Do you have a formula that you move through? Do you have a way of breakdown?
Well, I think for my short form content, which is what most people know me for, right? That's whether it's on TikTok, YouTube, or even now Instagram, it's very similar to the process that started all the way back in 2020 when I was stuck in my house and, lawyering at my dining table in my slippers and then being like, okay, now what are we going to eat for dinner? Oh, I'm going to post this on the TikTok, So like, it's very similar. Like I'll see something on Instagram or I'll see something on TikTok or YouTube and be like, oh, that looks really good. 99.9% of the time, it's not vegan. And I never let that stop me. I always say, well, okay, this is an interesting challenge. So for example, I saw this absolutely insane looking toast the other day. It was like a interesting French toast made out of milk bread and then like toasted and crunchy and like brown sugar and then topped with some sort of caramel sauce and all this stuff. And I was like, I'm gonna make that. None of these things are vegan, but I will freaking figure it out. And that's usually how it starts, right? I'll see something, somebody will throw down the gauntlet with something non-vegan and I'll be like, I'm gonna veganize that. Not really because I want to show people, ooh, look, I can veganize it, but more because I just want to eat it. And that's what I need to do. So that's the recipe part. And veganizing things, especially these days, I haven't been probably vegan as long as you have, but I have been vegan now for almost a decade, and it is so much easier now with the tools that we now have. But it's not that hard. And then comes the harder part for me, which is, obviously I have to film that, which in the beginning was really easy because it was literally just my crappy iPhone. And now they have really good iPhones, but at that time I had a really not great one. But now I use multiple very expensive cameras, and I use Premiere or Final Cut to edit my videos. I don't use my phone. So that is hard as just a technical thing. And then finally, it's the writing. And there, Tabatha, I find that extremely challenging these days because people think, oh, it's because she's run out of stories. I was like, no, 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 no. As a human being, you have an infinite amount of stories at any given time. All you have to do is listen and tell. That's it. It's more just over time. You know how like when you're little, you can climb a tree and it's no problem and you have no fears and you're like, I don't care. It's just 20 feet off the ground. I'm fine.
Yeah.
But then as you get older, you like can't even like walk up the stairs because you're afraid you're going to fall to your death. I think that's a little bit what it is. In the beginning, I was like, yeah, no, I'll tell the most vulnerable, private moments of my life, and hopefully somebody can feel less alone because of it. And now, with everything that's happening in the world and with all the pain that is so visible now with the internet, with the news, with media, I find myself sort of having a hard time bearing myself in that way because it's just hard to just survive from day to day without being depressed. And so I find that's the hardest part. But usually I just sit down and I write something if I can.
Yeah, it's really interesting you say that. I was so resistant for such a long time to do a podcast. And something that I kept saying was there was enough noise. I didn't want to contribute to the noise. I wanted to be valuable in a sea of noise, but I didn't want to just contribute and be another voice that was kind of talking at people. And I've also realized, again, just going through some personal things as we all have, and doing it privately, hidden in many ways, and kind of hiding a huge portion of my life and what was happening for me. So everyone would go, oh, look, you're always confident, you're always happy, you're always showing up, but actually not realizing what was going on inside or what was happening behind closed doors, of how important it is to do that and to navigate the two, which is what I'm hearing you say, because it gives other people permission that it's okay if they're feeling like that or going through that, or someone has experienced something similar in some way and we don't feel quite as alone.
I'm so glad that you said that because that's exactly what it is. I think that I felt almost obligated to not have private feelings anymore, not have private grief, not have private struggle. Because I was like, well, no, I mean, that's the whole Korean vegan is everybody gets a piece of me. But like you said, that's not how life works. That's not how we as human beings are. There can be great stretches of time where we feel comfortable being open, and then bam, something terrible happens. You lose somebody that you love, or a relationship goes sour, or, your health is under attack. And all of a sudden, your natural and understandable instinct is to put that tortoiseshell over you and just curl up and say, I need to be inside right now. I need to draw the windows closed. I need to, just be in the dark and by myself. And I think you're right, navigating having permission to do that, but then also kind of learning when it's time to peek out from that shell and say, maybe there's somebody out there who's going through this and could join me in this and help me recover from this. I think that's there's a lot of growth that happens around that question, and that's really what I think that I'm going through as a creative right now is, how do I navigate that? When is it right for me to share this? Is it right for me to share this? What do I share and how?
Yeah, I think it's a dance. And I think when you're someone that is a content creator in the public eye, have an expectation that people are putting on you. And anytime you're in the public eye, people have an expectation of you. Doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It just is.
Yes.
That it's knowing how to navigate the two. A mentor of mine told me that you don't have to invite everyone into all your house. You invite them into your parlor or your kitchen or whatever room you decide. And they were talking about a metaphoric house, by the way, not a physical house. And they kept explaining to me that, imagine that you have this beautiful parlor or this beautiful dining room or open kitchen, and that's where everyone congregates and you do all the things that you do for everyone. And then you get to go and retreat to your bedroom or your beautiful bathtub, and that's just for you. And that's how you approach things. And it was such a beautiful metaphor, I think, for anyone that gives of themselves in any way. And let's face it, we all do it in one way or another. It's a beautiful metaphor to kind of remember.
Yeah, for sure. It's beautiful and also incredibly useful and also a little bit motivating. I'm like, what can I do to make my parlor like extra beautiful?
Yeah, well, that was one of their suggestions. You have to visualize what the parlor looks like,
Exactly.
and that's where everyone come. You already have the kitchen, so
Exactly.
I saw a quote in an article that you did. I don't remember the publication, and it said, and this is quoting you, although my career choice of lawyer was not made with a great deal of intention, everything I did thereafter was very purposeful.
That's very true. It was not made with intention at all. But like it was literally like, you know how when you take a test, multiple choice test, and you get 4 choices and none of them seem like good options, but you're like, I'll just go with the one that's like least horrendous to me. Like that's basically what I did with the law. But so much of it was driven by anxiety. And for me, I'm the type of person who hates being indecisive. And so I oftentimes make decisions without a lot of thought in it, just because I need to soothe that anxiety of like, oh, I need finality. Like I need to know what I'm doing. I don't like this, like, where are we going for dinner crap. Like, I just need to know. Okay. And then once I know, then I'm the machine. I will, enact everything necessary to figure out how to reach whatever objective I have set for myself. So once I decided the objective is law, it was very easy for me to put in all the milestones. I think the scary part, which is, when you said, okay, I'm 50 years of my life, that's great. WTF, what do I do now? Well, I had that moment when I made partner. I mean, from the moment I took my LSAT, I was like, that's the goal, make partner. Okay, well, now you've made partner. Now what are you going to do? And that was terrifying. It was extremely terrifying. And I think it was partly because of that terror, that WTF moment, that all of a sudden this hobby started to look more and more enticing to me.
Was it terrifying to make the leap then from, again, we'll use this hobby, right? Was it terrifying to make that leap from what you had started that was obviously growing and make that the full-time intention and where your purpose and everything else was going? Was that as frightening?
It was totally frightening. It was, first of all, I had decades of my parents' voices to have to overrule. And, I don't know like what your relationship with your parents are like, but for me, like I lived my whole life trying to please my parents. That instinct of you got to please your parents was so second nature to me and so powerful. So knowing that I would do something that my parents would be very much against, that was right then, and that was terrifying, right? And then of course just terrified to fail. I mean, I could fail at the law, that's true, but I had, nearly 2 decades suggesting that I probably wouldn't.
The muscle was built.
Exactly, but I had nothing really other than, oh wow, TikTok is really blowing up this year. Like that was it, to show me that maybe I had some track record to base this decision on. And again, I'm very analytical and I'm like, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's not very rational thinking here. You got 20 years of law and you've got like 1 year at TikTok. Is that really the basis of completely disrupting your career? that's very much a gloss of that. And it's also an unfair characterization in retrospect of that decision-making process. But that's really at the heart of it. But ultimately, I think it was just surrounding myself with people who really believed in me, namely my husband first, and then, my lit agent and a couple of other really close friends who could sort of be the voices that would talk down my parents' voices in my
Mhm.
head, my own negative thinking. And then also just feeling a little bit like I deserve this. I worked really hard, my whole life. I've been the good girl. I did everything I was supposed to do. I listened to my parents. Look at them. I'm their dream child now. I've made it to the top of my legal career. Joanne, I think you deserve to have a little bit of fun now. And what's the worst that can happen? You're a tough cookie. If everything does go to crap, you'll figure it out anyway. So let's do this. I think you deserve it. And I think that's really what won out in the end.
It's such a beautiful conversation, and it's so validating and empowering to hear it, because we can all have those conversations with ourselves for something in our life, right? May not be the big career change that you had, but there is something that we can all have that conversation with ourselves and say, it's okay, you deserve it. It doesn't matter what the it is, right? And give ourselves that permission.
I totally agree with that. And that's not easy to do sometimes because you're working uphill sometimes to really believe that you deserve something as simple as you deserve kindness. You deserve love. You deserve food. You deserve this 15-minute walking break. Like these things sometimes are so monumental in their size when we think about all of the voices that tell us, no, you don't deserve it. And it's important to really break it down into its simplest form. Like you deserve to be happy. You deserve to feel loved. You deserve to have a break.
Well, that's why I'm asking. I had this really interesting experience a couple of weeks ago at yoga, actually. And this lady came up to me and was just so appreciative and so kind because she listened to the podcast. And we'd just started. I think I was like one episode in, right? But
Amazing.
she was so lovely and really just how inspired she was from listening to the podcast and listening to the guest. And she's not in the beauty industry at all. In fact, from her words, she's in a very dry, paper pushing, uncreative industry, right? And to listen to someone like you, which is why I love having conversations with creatives from all different industries, because there is someone sitting there going, how do I give myself permission to make a choice to maybe not be so rigid, or to maybe introduce more creativity into my life, whatever that looks like? It doesn't matter what it looks like. How do I do that?
I think that's a great question. And I love that question because I did it in the most timid way possible. The end result, like you said, is what it is, right? I left my career in law to pursue the Korean vegan full time. But at the beginning, it was just veganize this one chocolate cake, like that's really what it was. And snap a picture of it with your phone and put it on Instagram. That was the
One step,
extent. One
just
step.
one little step.
Exactly. If you put so much pressure on yourself, like, oh, I need to change my career. I need to start an Etsy account and, open a business.
Yeah.
And like, I need to create the next whatever NFT or, like if you put that much pressure on yourself, some people, they need that pressure like that. They're like, I'm not going to do anything until I'm pushed into a corner and I need to do it to survive. That's great. I'm not that person. I will just not do it. Like if somebody tells me that's what I need to do. But if all I needed to do was, well, I kind of want to make this chocolate cake and it needs to be plant-based and maybe I'll just take a picture of it and throw it up on a Instagram account. That's all I need to do. And I don't even need to ever do it again. That could actually be all it takes to
I love
add
that.
that creativity.
And it sounds like when you had that thought process, you didn't have an expectation. It really was just let me do it. Correct me if I'm wrong. It sounds like you documented it, right? You took the picture and put it on Instagram as a way of holding yourself accountable.
I think it was more just like my husband told me
Okay.
to. Yeah, he was like, "You're the Korean vegan. You should
Just put
post
it.
this on."
Okay.
Yeah, I was like, "Okay." And I did. And that's what I mean. Like I can't overstate enough the importance of having at least one person in your life to be that for you,
Yeah.
who can see the creativity in you that you may not yet see in yourself.
Yeah.
And that's
I
really
love
what
that.
my husband did. Yeah.
I
Mhm.
I work with clients privately, and when I work with clients, and I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, and I coach women, and a lot of them are kind of stuck in their lives. Maybe they're transitioning out of one thing into another, or they're looking for the next thing, and really stepping into their authenticity. One of the things I tell everyone is I see their greatness because I'm not carrying their baggage. So all
Mm.
I can see is everyone's potential, and I can see their greatness because I'm not carrying what their parents said, or what their husband said, or what a shitty boss said to them. So all I can see is just this beautiful being of potential and magnificence.
I
And I
love
can hold
that.
that for them instead of holding all the baggage.
I think that's so important. That's you find that one person, and if you're listening and you don't have that person in your life, well, that means that that person is still out there, and you need to
100%.
find that. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Do you think creativity is nature or nurture?
Oh, that's a tough one. I mean, I think there are some people who have it naturally. I really, really do. But I think that there are probably far fewer than people actually realize. So my husband's a great example. When I first met him, because he'd spent his whole career as a concert pianist, I just assumed like, oh, this kid must have been born this way. You know, he's just naturally gifted. But now I see, no, actually, you know what? He's naturally good. He has a naturally good work ethic. He is very goal oriented. He is very good at focusing. And maybe he's been blessed with relatively good pitch, but other than that, I think it was more some of these rudimentary, dare I call it, skills that he excelled at that allowed him to develop this creativity that from the outside looking in looks extraordinary and out of this world. And I think that's probably the case for a lot more quote artists than I think people realize. It wasn't that they were just born with like Mozart, like genius. I don't really know that many people have that. I think it's more that they took what they had and then built something that is so uniquely beautiful that it
Mm.
looks a lot like creativity. Maybe that is what's creative. I
Well,
don't know.
dare I say, when I hear you describe it, it sounds like he has his own spreadsheet within him.
Exactly. I mean, and that is so true because he has his timers on in terms of how long he has to practice every day.
Yeah.
And believe me, when you listen to the same phrase of music being played literally 5,000 times a day, it does not sound creative. But when you hear that phrase perfectly played at a recital or at a
Yeah.
concert, then you realize, okay, that's where it was.
Yeah. That's so true. Is there, again, with your storytelling abilities, and the fact that you are vulnerable and you do share with us about your culture and your childhood and your personal struggles that you've gone through, and how you've overcome them, how you feel about food yourself, which I feel the same way, by the way. I have such a love-hate with food. Um, Thankfully, age is getting better that I like it.
Mm.
I
I
like
look
it now.
forward to this.
I will say age has taught me that I like it. It doesn't create that love-hate push-pull as much anymore. Is there one recipe, especially because you share so many recipes that are your heritage and your culture, and from um, your lineage? Is there one recipe or one story that goes with a recipe that is just special in your heart above all the others?
Yeah, oh, I have so many. I I would say, the story that I always think about when I think about my food journey and my cooking journey in particular is probably silken tofu stew or sundubujigae, which is very popular right now. It's a very viral Korean stew, as the kids like to say it now. And I've been making that stew for so long because it was the first Korean food I ever learned to make from my mom. When I went to college, like I feels like yesterday, but it was such a long time ago. When I went to college, it was the first time in my life that I didn't have instant and constant access to Korean food. The dorms don't feed you Korean food. They feed you pizza and waffles and tater tots. And for the first time in my life, I was like, wait, I actually really like Korean food. I didn't know this. I thought I hated it, but I'm sick of pizza like after the first week, right? And so I started going to this restaurant. It was a very small mom and pop run Korean restaurant. And shame on me, I didn't know the names of any of the foods I'd grown up eating because I took them for granted. And I was American. So I didn't need to know the names, right? So I'm looking through the menu, and thank God it was a picture menu. And so I was like, this is what my mom used to make for me back home. I want this dish, right? And I know I like it. And it's called sundubujigae. So I used to eat it. I would save all my leftover change in like that bathroom cup, and at the end of the week, maybe I'd have enough. It was like $6 to buy myself a sundubujigae. And I'd get that. And so when I graduated, all my girlfriends were like, you're sundubujigae girl. You eat it every week. We're going to buy you one of these tteokbaekis, which is a Korean stone pot, so you can make your own sundubujigae. So as soon as I got home from college, I said, Oma, I got this tteokbaeki. Can you show me how to make sundubujigae? That was the first recipe I ever learned in Korean food. And it was the first Korean recipe that I veganized when I went plant-based.
It's amazing.
So yeah, that always comes to mind. And it remains like the one dish that I ask my husband to make on my birthday. I'm like,
That's
please
amazing.
make me sundubujigae.
I have to say, you inspired, not that, don't get mad. Anyone listening, you're going to get mad at me. Not that Australians have a cultural heritage of food, as do many other cultures like Koreans. We don't. Get as mad as you want. We just
really?
don't even try it. So, but I think, again, the power of food and the power of story is listening to some of your stories. It comes back to those memories, and often our really heartfelt memories, and sometimes not so heartfelt, are around food, because maybe it was around a table, or maybe it was a dish that our mums made for us and they're not able to make it for us anymore. And maybe it's the thing that when you were a little kid, doesn't matter how old you get, when you don't feel well and you're under the weather, you want that thing your mum made you when you were a little kid that made you feel so much better. So you encouraged me, so I want to say thank you for veganizing some Aussie things that, it's interesting you talked about, this dish and not even realizing what the name was. There are Australian things that I'm like, I don't even know if I like that. And then all of a sudden, when I get really homesick, or if I feel a little under the weather, or I'm just having a, woe is me day, which we're all allowed to have every now and then, you want something comforting and familiar that reminds you of a different place and time. So yeah, you've encouraged me to veganize some of my Aussie recipes. So my sausage rolls are stellar.
Oh, I have to try them.
You. We'll have to do a cook-off one day. My sausage rolls are absolutely stellar. And I saw you posted a recipe for scones. We call them scones. You call them scones. That just looked divine. But I think you did a lamington recipe.
What's a lamington?
Did you do a lamington recipe, or I want you to do a lamington recipe?
I will do a lamington, but I don't know what it is.
So a lamington is a very traditional Australian. It's a vanilla cake that is rolled in chocolate and then rolled in coconut. You did a lamington.
I did, but
I know
they're really hard Tabitha. Oh my
I
God,
know,
because
they're pain in the ass.
oh, the vegan cakes are so fragile. I mean, like I have tried, I think I must have done like 10 of those because I was like, I got to get this vegan cake right so that it doesn't break. And oh my God, those are hard.
Yeah, I know. Well, there's another one that I'm going to give it to you
Okay.
because I know you can work it out and I just don't have the wherewithal. Although I love to cook and I'm actually a really good cook, I don't have the wherewithal to work out a recipe.
Challenge accepted.
I want you to veganize a pavlova for me.
Oh, I could do pavlova. I've done that
I knew
already.
you
Yeah.
could. All
Yeah,
right,
I
well,
can do
you can
pavlova and
DM me the recipe
yeah.
because that sounds
It's going to be
amazing.
gorgeous.
It's going to be epic. I love it.
Yes. And I have definitely developed I've never had pavlova like the real one from before, but I've developed an appreciation for that sort of texture, that mousse kind of like, but like crispy. And then also just like pairing it with the right combination of things is so important because you can't just like dump whatever on it.
No.
You got to do it right.
Yeah, you have to do it right. And again, I just want to say thank you. You have inspired me for a really long time. And as I said, I followed you for a long time, but I love your recipes. I love your cookbook. I was so excited when I saw that you won the James Beard Award. I love that you kind of made vegan more of a mainstream thing. And I also enjoy seeing people emulate you.
Oh.
Because there are many people emulating you in their own way and with their own culture and with their own food. And I know for some people they get annoyed when they're copied or emulated, but it is a form of flattery. And again, it's someone opened the door for many of us to walk through, and you opened the door for a lot of people with not only in food and giving us that permission, but to tell our stories and to talk about some of our challenges and to talk about our culture and our memories. And it is a really wonderful thing. So thank you. It has been a delight to talk to you one day in real person with you cooking. I'll
I
bring
cannot
sausage rolls.
manifest that. Yes, you bring the sausage rolls, I'll bring the pavlova, and somehow we'll make some roly cake together.
Totally. We'll have like an Aussie-ish, Korean,
Yes.
American, whatever. We'll have a little feast.
It'll be epic.
It'll be amazing. Joanne, thank you.
Thank you. I've had an absolutely amazing time.
Reflecting on our time with Joanne Molinaro on Creative Thrive, I'm so inspired by her resilience and her insightful approach to creativity. Joanne's philosophy of try, learn, and try again underscores the courage needed to embrace the creative process, even when it's uncomfortable. She emphasized the importance of evolving creatively and finding a balance between sharing and introspection. This delicate dance between public expression and personal retreat is so challenging and also empowering, especially for anyone in a public-facing life. Joanne also highlighted the reassuring power of community in navigating doubts and how when we surround ourselves with supportive voices, they can transform our inner narratives. Her advice to stay open to new ideas encourages us all to listen to the universe a little bit more and be receptive to those unexpected whispers that might lead us to our next big breakthrough. And the theme that resonates throughout our conversation is not merely overcoming self-doubt, but actively pushing through it by continuously challenging the boundaries of self. Joanne didn't let her doubts about being a creative stop her. Instead, she used them as a navigation tool to push forward with resilience and tenacity, drawing on her vast life experiences and daring to try. Thank you so much, Joanne, for sharing your light and your path with us today. And to everyone listening, let's take Joanne's words to heart. Keep trying, keep evolving, and most importantly, keep opening ourselves up to the endless possibilities that creativity brings. And if you would like to explore your personal growth journey further, then I invite you to join me at Thrive Hive, where we offer live monthly classes. You can learn more at thrivehive.co. And please support Creative Thrive by liking, following, and subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform. Your engagement helps us to continue to share the stories of these inspiring creatives. Until we meet again, keep nurturing your creative spirit and don't hesitate to let it soar. See you next time on Creative Thrive.